much and you can.
Yeah.
Okay,
By the way, we already decided the world was not coming to an end.
Did we?
Oh, that's because the world had its beginningless. It's there's a beginningless time, so there's a big.
Oh, I'm glad did you talk about it then?
Yeah,
Oh, good.
about 2 minutes, but we thought about it.
Yeah. All right, let's go ahead and remember what we talked about last week. Lama Yeshe was describing prostration. That's the first thing. And obviously we're not going to be doing physical prostrations here, but you can just imagine, you're prostrating to the enlightened beings, the wisdom of the enlightened beings, the Dharma teachings, and the Sangha, those people like our gurus, the monks, the bodhisattvas, our teachers that are helping us on this. So it's a way of sort of overcoming one's own pride. We tend to think, I'm doing this, I'm the one doing this, but we're actually completely relying on everything. Since we've been born, we've been relying on others. So prostration is a way of subduing one's own pride and opening your mind and heart up to the beneficial help that is out there for us. So just imagine, doing that 3 times. You can just imagine, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in the space in front of you that you're prostrating 3 times. Then we can say this refuge prayer first in English and then recite it 2 times in the Tibetan chant. And what we're taking refuge in mainly is the wisdom of the Buddhas, the wisdom that we have been given, because it is the wisdom and the way that we bring that wisdom into all of our actions, body, speech, mind, that is going to create the transformation for us from being a afflicted, confused being to a being that is beneficial, that is wise, that is loving, and compassionate. So here we go. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the positive potential I create by listening to teachings and the other paramitas, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sangye chedang tsoki chognam la, jangchu bardu dagni kyapsu chi, dagi chenyeng yipe sonam ki, rola penchir sangye drupa sho. Sangye chedang tsoki chognam la, Jangchu bardu dagni kyapsu chi, dagi jinzo gipe sonam ki, rola penchir sangye drupar sho. If you remember last week, we did some visualizations of the Buddha Chenrezig, is the Buddha of compassion. And these next 4 measurable thoughts are the essence of if you might want to say, the essence of the message of Buddha Chenrezig, the Buddha of compassion. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. And this is the attachment and the aversion where we hold some close and others distant. And at the end of this prayer, it is suggested that we say, may we be inspired and blessed by our gurus and all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas to develop the positive momentum in our life, the great compassion, the profound wisdom, and the spiritual power that will enable us to traverse the stages and levels of the path to reach enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. So this is kind of a way of dedicating these four measurable thoughts. And then quickly we'll go through this 7 limb prayer, a very important this is a very important outline of a very important practice. So let's just, for those of us who are engaging in the 7 limb practice, this is a reminder of it. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind, and present clouds of every type of offering, actual and mentally transformed. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time, and rejoice in the merits of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until samsara ends, and turn the wheel of dharma for sentient beings. I dedicate the merit created by myself and others to the great enlightenment. And then there is this mandala offering. And what we're doing here is we are imagining what is called a Buddha field, a pure land. You might even say it's a kind of realm where everything is under the influence of an enlightened beings. And all of these realms that we talk about in Buddhism, the hell realm, the hungry ghost, the form and formless realm, the human realm, the animal realm, all of these realms are not objective places that exist out there. They are all states of mind. They are generated by nothing other than the mind. So when we are making this mandala offering, we're generating in our own mind a pure land where we can go and continue our practices and studies. For instance, the lamas at Drepung Monastery, when they were saying the prayers for Tracy after she passed, the clairvoyant monk said, she's gone to a pure land. This is where she's been reborn. I mean, it's a fantastic thing that happened for her with that amount of prayers being said in her name and for her benefit to go to one of these pure lands. So again, when we are making this mandala offering, don't think that it's a objective place that exists out there. It's something we ourselves generate with our mind. The actions of our body, speech, and mind generate our
That's why
experiences.
it's an offering, because
Yeah.
it's sort of like a way of saying, this is what I'm
This is what I'm
This is what
visualizing.
I'm generating.
This is what I'm generating. This is what I'm shooting for. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Sajipaki Jukshingmetu Tramrirabling Nidegyempati Sangejindu Bidevuragi Drogunam Dakshina Chepashu. And then we offer it into the heart of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas as we say, Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Yayataya. Past couple of weeks, we've focused on a couple of mantras and the meanings of those mantras. The first was the Shakyamuni Buddha mantra, which is Tayata Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Sloha. And that particular mantra outlines for us the path to enlightenment, the path that the Buddha took to enlightenment. So the core of this are these 3 versions of Muni, Muni, Maha Muni. Muni is a Sanskrit Hindu term that means a wise sage or a holy being, a saint or a sage. So the first, and this is describing Shakyamuni Buddha. So the first Muni is the control that Shakyamuni Buddha was able to have over his body, actions of his body, speech, and mind that enabled him to lift himself out from being reborn in what we would call lower realms of existence where there is confusion and suffering, and get himself into what we would call a precious human rebirth, so that He was liberated from the suffering of the lower realms. That's the first movement, and was able to have a precious human rebirth, such as what we have right now, where we are actually studying the Dharma. That's what makes it precious, really. Otherwise, there are many kinds of human rebirths which are not so precious if you actually analyze it. So we have a precious human rebirth, just like Shakyamuni Buddha did. And he used that rebirth to develop the spiritual path that he was on, which is what we are doing. So we this mantra connects to us and our own experience. And then the final, the second muni is the realization of emptiness that Shakyamuni Buddha had. The direct realization of emptiness. And what this does is that it releases us from the suffering of samsara. It releases us or liberates us from the suffering of samsara. So this is what Buddha Shakyamuni did. Through this direct realization of emptiness, he was released from the suffering of samsara. In other words, it ceased for him. There's what we call nirvana, cessation. But there's still more to go, because there's the final Mahamuniye, which is the great control of the mind, where the mind actually realizes, overcomes the obscurations, cognitive obscurations and afflictive obscurations in the mind, our own mind, and has a direct experiential realization of non-duality. And through that, one achieves final enlightenment. And that's the Mahamuniye. So that is describing the path that the Buddha was on, and the path that we are on as Mahayana Buddhists. The second mantra was the mantra of Chenrezig, Om Mani Padme Hum. And Lama Zopa Rinpoche said that this mantra contains the entire path in it. So the entire path would be the method aspect of the path and the wisdom aspect of the path. The method aspect of the path is Om Mani. Mani would be the aspect of that mantra, Mani, which is the compassionate actions that we take, the methods that we use to develop ourselves, just the way Shakyamuni Buddha did. And then Padme is the wisdom, is the wisdom that realizes the nature of self and phenomena, and that achieves this sense of this state of non-duality. Very important. So Om Mani Padme Hum is about the whole path again, but from the aspect of Chenrezig, the compassionate Buddha. So when we're thinking about non-duality, this is a really important topic. It's part of what we're talking about today. Non-duality means that we are not separate from everything that appears to us. We are not separate from the other people, other sentient beings, the environment, all appearances that arise in our mind. We are not distinct and separate from. It's a dualistic, non-dualistic appearance. This is a very hard concept for us to grasp, because we are the foundation of what samsara is, what samsara cyclic existence is, arises from what is called ego self-grasping. In other words, believing that there is an inherently fixed, independent, self-existent me. And this is what creates all the suffering, because this idea of an independent, self-existent me flies in the face of reality. Nothing in reality has that kind of existence. And so by continually pushing at this independent, self-existent me and getting what I want and what I need, we're fighting reality. We are actually, I guess you could say, we're deluded. The opposite of realistic is delusional. And so the ego, self-grasping, is a delusional state of mind which causes suffering. And this whole samsaric system, cyclic existence system, has arisen due to that self-grasping. So I want to look at the Manjushri mantra, and we'll go over this a little bit before we get to the teaching. So if you can put up first, I guess, put up the image of no.
What?
first put up
Just the Manjushri?
the mantra itself,
Okay.
so we can see it. I think we're all familiar with it, but some may not be. So it is a 7-syllable, and it's. Oh, we can use that. That's fine. We can use that.
I'm just trying to get it bigger.
Go ahead. We'll use it. This is
To get. How do I can't.
I think we can see it.
Okay.
It's okay. This was when His Holiness gave an empowerment, Manjushri empowerment, and this was part of the visual for that empowerment. So starting at the very bottom, and this is a lotus that is to be visualized in the heart of Manjushri. This is a lotus that is at the heart chakra of Manjushri. So at the bottom of that lotus is the syllable Om. And as we've discussed before, Om represents transformation. In ordinary terms, everything is impermanent and is constantly changing and transforming. Sort of I talked about this last time, a microcosm of Om for us is our breath. Our breath, which, we're taking in air, filling up, releasing, and then letting it out. So you could take the 3 syllables of Om and connect that to your breath, which would be ooh, letting the breath out, ooh, and closing. But that is a constantly cycling in and out, cycling in and out. And this, in terms of non-duality, this is also a microcosm. Because what we're doing, and we don't realize it, we never think of it that way, we just think this is our breath. But what we're actually doing is we're taking in oxygen from the environment that's all around us, that we are we're connected to in a non-dual way, for sure. We're taking that in, and as we are filling up and then releasing and letting the breath go out, we are putting out carbon dioxide, which aids all of the plant life in photosynthesis, which actually creates the oxygen that we take in. So we are connecting ourselves with everything through the breath. So the breath is a good way for us to sort of get an idea of what's being talked about in terms of transformational non-duality, impermanence with this Om. So in Buddhism, in Mahayana Buddhism, what Om represents is our ability, our capacity to transform our ordinary body, speech, and mind into the body, speech, and mind of an enlightened being. That's what the Om is representing here in Mahayana Buddhism. So I want to recite this mantra, Om Arapat Sanadi. And we'll just do it fairly, not quickly like we normally do, fairly slowly 7 times. And if you can visualize the Om, that's fine. But what I would want us to do is think about, as we're saying Om Arapat Sanadi, focus on Om and the fact that we are capable of transforming our ordinary body, speech, and mind into an enlightened body, speech, and mind. So just focus on Om as we're saying this mantra 7 times. Om Arapat Sanadi, 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 Om Arapat Sanadi. Now I want us to look at the second syllable, which is going up counterclockwise. It's to the left of the Om that's on the bottom. That is very much like the Om. It's just missing the little circle and the sort of looks like wings on the top of it. This syllable is Ah. And what this represents in this mantra is the non-dual nature of self and phenomena is beginningless and without cause. So our non-dual nature is beginningless and without cause. So as we recite this mantra again 7 times, think of this particular aspect of it. Our non-dual nature is beginningless and without cause. Om Arapatsana di Om Arapatsana. Om Arapatsana di Om Arapatsana di Marapatsana di Om Arapatsana di Om Arapatsana. Beginningless nature is uncreated. Our non-dual nature is uncreated and without beginning. Now we move on to the syllable that's above that. That is Ra. Sort of flat on top of the line going down, a little curve underneath it. That is Ra. And what Ra represents in this mantra is that our non-dual nature is uncontaminated and without stain. This non-dual nature is uncontaminated and without stain. So think of that our nature is uncontaminated and without stain as we recite this mantra again 7 times. Om Arapatsana di Om Arapatsana di Om Arapatsana di Om Arapatsana Om Arapatsana di Om Arapatsana di Om Arapatsana di. Our non-dual nature is uncontaminated and without stain. The next syllable, which is up at the top, is Pa. And Pa represents the idea that our non-dual nature is the ultimate truth. That is what ultimate truth is. Everything is non-dual, has a non-dual nature. So as we're reciting this mantra again 7 times, think that our non-dual nature is the ultimate truth. Om Arapatsana di Om Arapatsana di Om Arapatsana di Om Arapatsana Marapatsana di Om Arapatsana di Om Arapatsana di. Then going clockwise now down from the Pa, that next syllable is called Sa. Sa. And what this represents in this mantra is that our non-dual nature does not die, nor is it reborn. Just contemplate that. Our non-dual nature doesn't die, and it isn't reborn. Think about this again as we recite this mantra 7 times. Om Arapatsana di 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 Arapatsana di Om Arapatsana di. Our non-dual nature does not die, nor is it reborn. Going down from that, then on the right, this other letter that has a little squiggle in it. This is Na, the syllable Na. And what this represents in this mantra is that the names that are given to self and phenomena are nothing more than labels. They are mere labels. The non-dual nature that exists behind those names and labels is neither gained nor lost. That non-dual nature is always there. The names that we give to things are just labels, and that's all they actually are. So with that thought, we'll recite 7 more times. Om Arapatsana di Om Arapatsana di Om Arapatsana di Om Arapatsana di Marapatsana di Om Arapatsana di Om Arapatsana. Then the final syllable is the one that's in the very center. This is the syllable D. And what D represents is internal awakening. So D is one of the roots of the word Buddha. Buddha. So when D is in Buddha, da, it is an what we would call or think of as the Buddha. It's an external. It seems external, an external kind of awakening. D, and that would be the I guess they would call it the when you're talking in terms of masculine and feminine, which we all contain equal amounts of actually, but it's out of balance in us. The Da would be the masculine aspect of awakening. You know, the body, the speech, the mind of an enlightened being. The D is the feminine aspect of awakening, this internal aspect of awakening. So that's what this D is. When we repeat this D at the end, we are sort of awakening our own internal understanding of non-duality. We're awakening this. So now we just repeat D with this idea of awakening our Buddha nature. So that is a lot there's a lot in that mantra, and it's a lot to sort of grasp conceptually in one sitting. However, this is what this mantra is holding and containing. And when we combine this with the visualization, you know, the visualization of Manjushri and all the symbolism there that has to do with awakening and the non-duality, then it becomes quite a powerful mantra in our practice. And I just wanted to go through this so we at least have heard it and are aware of it.
As a reminder to me, and maybe others should benefit from hearing about, why do mantras matter? What are they for? What are they doing to us? Why are they helping us change on the path?
Well, mantras kind of, the way Lama Zopa puts it is they almost serve as a protection for us. It's connecting us to these enlightened beings and the enlightened aspects that they're presenting to us. That we ourselves are to develop and grow into.
I guess I'm asking you kind of more like from a scientific, like we're forming sounds and
Oh yeah, it affects
what's that all about?
It affects what they call our winds and channels, especially if it affects the energy within our being.
So can you like kind of more completely?
Well, okay, I'll just describe my experience over the years of what has happened with mantra with me, so that I can just give you my experience. When I first said mantras over and over again, I felt nothing. And I really wasn't visualizing anything. I was just saying the mantras the way they said, the way our teachers told us to say the mantras. Because the teachings made sense to me, I was having faith or trust in what they were telling me to do. So I said the mantras. And then I began to study and look at the images of the beings, the enlightened beings that went along with those mantras. And I began to understand the symbolism in there. Then the thing I did that really just catapulted this into a new level was I imagined that these visualizations of these beings were superimposed over myself, and that I was Manjushri, I was Chenrezig, I was Buddha Shakyamuni. Not that I knew that I was, but that I was. It was sort of like I was embodying those kinds of aspects of what an enlightened being is. And so as I said those mantras then, with this visualization of them superimposed over me, I began to start to feel all kinds of energy happening throughout my body in different areas.
So can you like deconstruct why that would be? I'm talking about like, what's the mechanism here?
Can't tell you. I don't really know. All I know is that where the mind goes,
Do you know?
the winds go, the energy goes.
What's your knowledge about this question?
Yeah, not much more than what you said, other than that. My understanding of them is that
Oh, you need to take them.
as our mind gets subtler, winds move into different places, in particular our central channel, and that is and there are practices, external yoga, physical, almost like
one way I had it described to me was it's sort of like physical activity, which we haven't really been introduced to, like the physical movements of yoga is like banging on the pipes from the outside, the channels, meaning pipes, and so a mantra is like working on them from the inside. And it's a skillful means of moving winds into ultimately into our central channel, which is where
The money is.
where the deep experiences are. I
Yes.
guess.
I mean, that's actually a good analogy about the pipes and the, you know.
Yeah, it's kind of like
Yeah.
it's the stretches and the
Mhm.
stuff, and it's
Mhm.
working on it from the outside. And I can say that the brief time there have been little brief periods where where experientially I did some yoga prior to doing my meditation and mantra, and it made a huge difference.
Yeah.
It really, really did. And it's also why I think the prostration
Yes, exactly. I was gonna say
is a
that.
type of
Yeah.
yogic practice.
As well as the posture that they tell us, the 7-point posture.
Yeah.
It gets the body aligned so that the channels, the
Yeah.
winds flow through the channels freely.
Uh,
They're not blocked.
Yeah.
And
Okay, so we can say that
this is all part of that.
we
The
know that
mantras.
the mind, where the mind visualizes. So, for example, if you're visualizing something in your heart, we've been told, and I think it's easy enough to experience that you can feel the winds follow where the mind focuses.
Mhm.
And then by combining that with a sound, you're sort of bringing the vibrational energy of that sound or that series of sounds to the place. So it's kind of like a directed energy weapon on yourself.
Not a weapon, I suppose.
I think there's and I know you probably have it, Lama Zopa's Power of Mantra.
Yeah, I think it is on
In the
shelf.
intro, there's a really good,
Yeah.
maybe we can revisit it, but
Yeah,
there's
that's
a
a
really
good
good intro where he kind of addresses this, like, what,
Yeah.
how do they work?
Right.
You know, and
what I would suggest is that we try it.
Yeah.
We try it. We sit in the posture that Geshe Nimas told us to sit in. We focus our eyes the way he told us to focus them. We visualize these what you would call these Buddha figures, and have some understanding of the symbolism, and then the mantras themselves. What do the mantras mean? And as we do that, and we have an aligned energetic system, then those winds will begin to flow in those directions, and they open up things and they heal things. And I I really I can't say enough about what a good practice mantra is. There's a whole practice of it's called, I mean, they take the tantric practice is also called mantrayana, where you're visualizing and saying mantras and imagining. Uh,
I think the reason I'm asking this is because I'm getting old and I don't want to put time into things. If the more I know what it's having like a direct
mm,
impact on, the efforts I'm making in my practice.
yeah, I think we all.
Sometimes I ask the questions just for myself, and sometimes I feel like as a general question of our group.
Yeah.
Sometimes we just keep adding things to do without
Well,
the
other important thing I think of, again, to my limited understanding of mantra and the importance of those winds moving to the central channel, is that is where when the winds are in that central channel, our ability to dissolve our sense of self and other is strongest.
Yeah.
If that makes
Yeah.
sense. So our likelihood of having an experience of emptiness or selflessness or non-duality increases the more those winds are flowing in that manner. So
Right.
and mantras have very other ways of cultivating certain attitudes, outlooks, but ultimately that's the end game, I think.
Yes.
Is a direct
Definitely.
experience of that non-duality you're talking about, right?
Yes. Yuli, you had something?
I was going to say I have two really good books that kind of cover this whole discussion. this one.
Awakening the Sacred Body.
And this one, who is written by a friend of mine, Alejandro Schill, who's from Houston, and he's really good too. And you can see a lot of his stuff on YouTube. But this talks about the winds and the subtle energies and the movements of yoga and how to activate those. Very good.
What's that
I
second
recommend both of
title?
them.
What's that second title?
It's the Magical Movements of Body, Breath, and Mind by Alejandro
Yeah.
Schill.
Okay. Tibetan yoga, yeah.
And this is written by his teacher. And this is Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche.
Great, thank you. Yeah. I think what all of us can recognize is that when we are not focused on the kind of energies and visualizations and ideas that we are being told to focus on in these mantras, and what we're doing instead is we're getting angry or projecting out or grasping at something out there that we think we need and want and must have, that the energy is much, much different. The energy is not flowing the way it does. It's not flowing in a peaceful way. It's disorderly. It's cut off. It is a negative kind of energy that we're actually quite familiar with. So when we begin to do these practices with the mantras and these, I guess I would call them sacred images, because they're set apart, we begin to experience a completely different kind of energy than we have up till now, and it is quite positive and it is transformative and it does affect the way we think about the world and our relationships. It completely changes the way we view all of that. So we're going to get into that now. So this is, will the world have an end? And Brian and Claudia, you're absolutely right.
Wow. Finally.
Now, tell me why you decided that the world will not have an end.
Well, because the world didn't have a beginning and it's always been, and it will always be, just because it is.
Right. All right. Okay. What would you say the world is? What is the world?
Well, I think the world is whatever you want to define your particular experience as, or your particular realities.
And how does that come about for each one of us?
Well, it comes about based upon previous experiences, habituations, karma, current life experiences, consciousness. I mean, and all of those continue to evolve and change and mold, and causes and conditions come together. And so, but I think the point is that I don't think the world is like the Earth. The Earth's not the world. I mean, maybe the world is the universe or whatever, that there's just thousands of worlds, quote, within this universe that constantly are growing, evolving, forming, but the idea is that if you have a beginningless existence, then you can never have an end.
Right. So getting back to what actually the world is, this goes back to Claudia, when you were talking about the way different species experience the world. So humans experience the world in a particular way based on the particular set of aggregates that we have. And we think that the world that appears to us is the way it is. But as Claudia described, and as any one of us, if we do research on this, will realize that the world that is appearing to a snake is different than the world that's appearing to a fly, which is different than the world that is appearing to a mosquito, which is very different than the world that is appearing to a human being. So which one is correct? Which one is the real world? We think as humans that the world that appears to us is the real world. But the fact is none of it has any kind of inherently fixed self-existence. Everything depends on how we are perceiving it. So this is so important to our happiness. Because when we're talking about, and when we're talking about our own happiness, usually what we're talking about are relationships. We're talking about relationships with one another, with other beings. And so when we become have a much more non-dualistic view in terms of our relationships, we open up to our relationships in ways that we never did before. And we do not, we're not saying, oh, you're wrong about this, I'm right about this. It's not that way at all. We accept actually where everybody is. And all we want to do is be of help, be of benefit, have one another that we be happy, that we figure out how to work with what we've got, whether it's other human beings or other animals, or any other kind of species. So when we begin to have this non-dualistic view, it opens up our understanding, our compassion, our ability to take in more and more and more. So I think that's where we're headed with this, with a non-dual view. It's the capacity to be more loving, more wise, more compassionate, more accepting, and more helpful. More helpful. When somebody is suffering, someone is going down a pathway that is hurting them, how do we help them? How do we benefit them? Not by judging them, not by criticizing them, not by saying they're losers. That doesn't help us at all. As a matter of fact, when we behave that way, when we say somebody is a loser, or I hate this person, or I want them out of my life, what we are doing is poisoning our own mental continuum. It's like poison within ourselves. That's what we're doing to ourselves. So we have to stop it. We have to stop it. We have to find the more realistic way of dealing with one another and dealing with the world as it appears to us. A more realistic way has to do with wisdom and compassion. So, will the world end? So here's the first stanza, and this is a doozy.
You read loudly.
Yes, I will read loudly, but this is not going to make any sense, okay? So I'll read it anyway. If it is thought that through disintegration or an antidote, an existent becomes non-existent, could there be disintegration or an antidote?
You're right about not making any sense.
Right. So I decided, okay, I'm going to go to somebody else who sort of did a interpretation of this same verse. So this is the same verse translated by Steve Collier, Bhikshu Steve Collier, and this is how he translated it. The inherently existent becomes non-existent because it either ceases naturally or is counteracted by something else. But since the inherently existent is impossible, how could there be its cessation or counteragent? It's still a little obscure, but it has a little more meaning than the first one.
Well, it's kind of like saying if there's no Empire State Building in the backyard, how could there be the elimination of an Empire State Building in our backyard?
That's
Yeah.
No, I mean,
Basically,
yeah. I mean, it's right.
that's
All
all
right.
he's saying.
So here's the interpretation of Cancer Jumpa Tech Junk, okay? On a gross level, a thing can be destroyed in two ways. It either ceases naturally because its causes have been exhausted, or it is counteracted by something else. A piece of fruit rotting and a person growing old are examples of things ceasing naturally. No outside force is exerted to make them deteriorate. To be counteracted means to be destroyed by a separate agent, such as a clay pot being smashed by a hammer. If things were inherently existent, neither of those two ways of becoming non-existent could occur, because an inherently existent object cannot be affected by other conditions. An inherently existent object would be permanent, self-enclosed, and remain unchanged forever. However, since inherently existent things do not exist to begin with, they can't be destroyed in either of those two ways. So that's basic, that's kind of what the conclusion you were coming to. Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Well, okay, so a couple things strike me. One, it's really important to realize what school we're in when he's saying these things, because in the quote unquote lower schools like Abhidharma is all about the creation of worlds and their destruction and the cycles of coming from karma and all that. He's talking. I'm assuming we're talking Madhyamika.
Yes,
highest level.
It's Nagarjuna, right?
Where we're getting into there is no beginning, there is no end, there is no arising, there is no cessation. They're not at the subtlest levels. And so one of the other things that hits me about this is being aware of the distinction between relative reality and ultimate reality. Like just always keeping that in mind. But like relatively, the person gets old and rot, or the fruit rots, and so. But ultimately, there's something different going on, right? Which what he's talking about, and that's
ultimately there's a transformation that's occurring, and that like when we're talking about a consciousness, that consciousness is continually transforming, so we can come into being as Christopher or Brian or Claudia as babies, and then we continually are changing. We're continually changing moment by moment, and then the particular body dies, but the consciousness, with all of its propensities and habits that we have developed, continues and finds another way of being.
Yeah, that helped me understand this whole idea of rebirth better too. Increase and death and rebirth and other lives. To me, what seems to make sense for me is I start thinking of it as a shift in perception. In other words, so the idea that in a moment we could begin seeing the world like a fly sees it, or like and that's not. I mean, that makes sense to me, honestly, logically, that circumstances could change, that my consciousness facilities could change,
the aggregates through which the consciousness,
and so the idea of being reborn as a fly or whatever is not so much something moving into another body, or it's a changing of your consciousness to where you are forced by your karma to see little legs and multiple images and all of that, right? Anyway, but we're talking, Nagarjuna's talking at such a subtle level here of almost beyond that.
It's so hard.
The end of death, the end of birth, the end, like
right.
I was thinking about our, the succession of lives.
Yeah.
If you sort of shifted into thinking about it the same way you would think about a piece of fruit, is it that example of all these stages of the pieces of fruit from the time
from the
seed is
seed
planted, but as we know, it goes back, and it's one of the things is, I think the biggest challenge for me is once a label is affixed to a phenomenon, it becomes very dualistic and concretized. So, you know, when I talk about a peach, I'm thinking a particular stage of this thing that's
Selfish.
has no beginning,
thing.
have no right.
Yeah.
Well, you know, has no beginning, has no end. It's just a transitory phenomena that once I go peach, it's sort of like I'm taking it out of the context of its actual nature.
This is what I was referring to when I was talking about how this is going to would help us in our relationships. Because what we do is we concretize our relationships. We'll say, so and so is this kind of person, so and so is that kind of person, as if we, you know, we're figuring it out, we're really cool, and we got it all together, and we figured out everybody. And we haven't at all. All we are doing is projecting onto them a concretized view of something that is constantly
The
changing.
same things to ourselves.
Yeah, we do the same thing to ourselves.
Without labels, it would be really hard to live in this environment. So
Absolutely.
we have to, in some ways, having bodies like that, we have to have labels on it. Otherwise, it would
Yeah, no, I know.
Right.
Stable
And so, yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right,
The
Claudia.
thing about confusing the label with the actual nature of the
That's
phenomenon.
part of
And I think this is why Buddhism says these names that we give things are merely labels and nothing more than labels. And what underlies those labels is basically has no beginning, has no end. It is can constantly transform, like we've been talking about, you know. So in our relationships, I think this helps. You know, that we sort of take away the labels that, you know, society and our parents and family and friends have sort of told us, well, we need to think about so-and-so person this way. No, we don't. We don't. We don't have to hate so-and-so person. We need to, for our own good as well as theirs, we need to shift. We need to shift.
Yeah, about the whole how would the world work if we didn't have like I once had this or part of this explained to me as a teacher was saying how he was always amazed at how creative some of the Tibetans that he had been with, like a car would break down or something, and they just the creativity of being able to like, oh well, we'll just use the shoelace to tie this, you know, or mechanical fix it, and he used that as like an example of like, okay, we see it as a shoelace that has this function that can only be this thing. And it's like, but when you get back from it a little bit, where you're not so attached to that label, this can become a lot of different things. And I was like, oh, that's kind of a helpful illustration
Oh, no,
of
that's-
the emptiness of whatever this thing is, right? It's can be used in multiple functions in multiple ways.
I think that's excellent though, because that can be
Right.
applied to so many different kinds of situations that we find ourselves in.
And he's talking about in that example objects, but you're saying like in relationships too, it's not
Right.
nothing's fixed
Right.
as and unchangeable, and
That's right.
yeah,
But look how we get stuck.
yeah. But look how we
Because we try to objectify it and fix it
we
as a
can
particular
break
thing.
that ice a little bit.
Yeah.
That.
And I think, I mean, if nothing else, just this Madhyamika view is, like you say, breaking up,
Yeah.
putting little chips in the ice block that we've got of concretizing everything.
Yeah.
And I think it's very, very helpful, even if we don't understand it all. Just the fact that we can go, wow, things exist in a non-dual way. Well, what does that mean? Let me think about that, you know. Because you say, the first time I heard that, I said, I don't even know what they're talking about. I really, you know. So I think the way we learn is through these little chipping away until finally, wow, a whole block has been taken away, and we can see more clearly.
I think about the attitude Geshe Dragpa had. 'Cause he's probably the monk I'm the most familiar. He is the monk I'm the most familiar with, who was in the process of dying. And it's sort of sometimes when we have these conversations, I start to get a little whiff of his attitude was not like our ordinary attitude. Now, in his case, he had done quite a bit of tantra practice, so he probably, you know, was. I mean, I can't even imagine how he saw his existence
Yeah.
at that point, but it is, it's interesting to just, I don't know. Hey, that scorpion is still up there. Seeing the little
Yeah,
corner.
right.
Oh, little Dharma protector.
I just think it's an auspicious thing, right? It's
Just
not
have it
protected.
as
All right, let's go on. All right, here's verse 73. In fact, there is no disappearance of the world. And world here is talking about samsara. There's no disappearance of the world through nirvana. In other words, there's no disappearance of samsara through nirvana. Asked whether the world has an end, the conqueror, the Buddha, remained silent. So in verse 73, world refers to samsara or cyclic existence. When someone attains nirvana, an inherently existent samsara does not disappear or become non-existent. If it did, then before someone attained nirvana, an inherently existent samsara would have existed. However, cyclic existence arises dependently, as described through the 12 links of dependent origination. Samsara has never been inherently existent. So, a simple way, rather than going through the 12 links, a simple way, a shorthand way of saying is samsara dependently arises based on this wrong view, or mistaken view, I should say, unrealistic view of grasping at an inherent me and mine. That's how samsara dependently arises. And until there are no more sentient beings that will be grasping at that, samsara will continue. It will continue. So there are Buddhas, enlightened beings. They exist. They are not trapped in samsara, but they can definitely make their presence within samsara, or the existence that we have, and help us. So it's a much more fluid thing. So what they're saying basically is the attainment of nirvana, or cessation of suffering, liberation from samsara, doesn't mean that samsara no longer exists.
So if everybody, all sentient beings were enlightened, there wouldn't be any samsara. So
That's a very right, and I remember.
an asymptotic state, so you're never going to reach it in some ways. That's sort of
Because
infinity.
I asked Geshe Drogpa that basic question way back when, I don't know how many years ago, and he said, "Well, the number of sentient beings are infinite."
Right. So this is why it's like an asymptotic state. So
So it's infinite. So there never will be there'll never be a situation where that a Buddha, an enlightened being, would not be helping sentient beings, because sentient beings are infinite. Consciousness is infinite. And you just have to, it's hard to wrap your mind around that one, but yeah.
I know it's like
We want like a
going back
conclusion.
to just saying the words sentient beings. I notice in my mind sort of like creates this set of beings called sentient beings. So it's sort of like this fixed,
Yeah.
maybe this fixed infinite number, but still it's
I mean,
oh, my mind is so
infinity is infinity in it.
yeah.
So yes, samsara doesn't end. The world doesn't end. The world does, what we think of as samsara doesn't end. However, it doesn't mean that we cannot liberate ourselves from the suffering of it.
Well, yeah.
And it doesn't mean that we cannot then attain enlightenment to help other sentient beings who are suffering.
I suppose one other thought related to this is like, maybe one of the things that happens is consciousnesses, generically speaking, move on, go into other corners of the universe, so to speak. But I mean, it's all consciousness. What the hell?
They go last part again.
It's all consciousness. What?
Oh, what the hell? Oh, okay. I missed that.
What the hell?
Okay, let's just continue with this.
Yeah.
In addition, an inherently existent samsara would be permanent and could not cease. In that case, when someone attains liberation from samsara, their inherently existent samsara could not disappear. However, when someone attains nirvana, cessation from suffering, their samsara becomes non-existent. The samsara that ceases at liberation is a conventionally existent samsara. Samsara doesn't become non-existent by natural means, however. A counterforce, the wisdom realizing emptiness, must be applied to cut its continuum. Whether we analyze gross objects or tiny ones, the arguments work equally on both. So when we're talking about being confused that things have what we would call an inherent self-existence, that's where the problem lies. That's where the problem. Whether we're talking about, an inherently existent table or an inherently existent hell, samsara.
But a dependently arisen conventional samsara does exist.
Does exist, yes.
Does that.
Right. The same as a table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And you can see, especially with the table, you can see all the stages of this dependent arising. Somebody had to have the thought to begin with, and then there's the thought, this thing we need, it needs to have a particular function. How do we build it? How do we make it? Get the materials, and do it. You make it, and then it immediately begins to disintegrate over time. And so it's always constantly, changing, shifting, changing. I think the trick for us is to realize how to flow with that and not to grasp onto things as if they were inherently existent and that they're always going to be, either good and wonderful or, awful and bad. That all of that can change. And the change is occurring in our own consciousness, our own mind, the way we view and perceive. We should use these points in our own meditation to examine how we think of the world as inherently existent. Perhaps we hold concepts about permanent subatomic particles, a permanent person, or an inherently existent person with an unchanging personality. Ordinary beings such as ourselves grasp at inherent existence, so the arguments that refute it are very helpful to us. We should investigate whether material objects, minds, thoughts, feelings, and so on have parts or not. If they do have parts, why does that prevent them from being inherently existent? Whether we analyze gross objects or tiny ones, the arguments work equally on both. We might think, if the person is momentary and disintegrates moment to moment, how can a momentary person who creates destructive or constructive karma ever experience the result of it? This is similar to some of the non-Buddhist questions that have already been refuted, and it's helpful to use the same reasoning to refute our own misconceptions. When we contemplate the continuum of a person, we understand that one moment of the person gives rise to another. The later moments are dependent on the former ones, but are not exactly the same as them. Such a continuum enables a cause to bear its result later on. However, this isn't possible if the person is permanent and static. And again, I try to be practical about this because, if we realize that a person is not permanent and static, then when we get back to our relationships, it means that no matter what we may have in terms of a problem with a relationship, there is always going to be a way that can be shifted and solved and changed. It may not be the way we think or we want, but it will be a change that we can actually work with.
Well, and I don't know, I would love to ask this of Geshe Nima and some other teachers, but some have told me there's something out there that you don't like. You have options on how to address it, right? Do you go and engage and try to fix things? to do? Or do you sit on the mat and work on the real reasons that's appearing to you, which is your karma, is forcing perception of this enemy, quote unquote, or whatever, and root out the root causes of what's causing that situation to appear. Do you know what I mean? And those are two very different ways of approaching it.
Right.
And you can say, well, does that mean we have to disengage from the world? And well, no, again, there's a practicality here, but ultimately, perhaps that is the real solution.
Well, I don't think disengaging is the
Right.
solution. I think disengaging and objectifying is the solution.
And that's essentially
engaging.
what I mean.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
right.
But it gives me the perspective. Because a lot of people say, well, oh, you're going on 3-year retreat. You're just like escaping the world. You're not. And it's like, no, it's you're doing the work to change your world, to change what, and whether it ripens in this lifetime or many lifetimes later, I don't know. How, and I think it's probably potentially fraught to think that it's gonna ripen this. Like, oh, I can just change the situation by sitting there. I don't know. I mean, maybe some can. Maybe very highly realized beings can. I mean, there's all these stories of people stopping rain,
Right.
So I don't know, but
Well, it doesn't have to be either or.
exactly.
It can be and.
Yeah.
You can do both.
Yeah.
You can change the way you react to something, but you should still see it as something that if you can be helpful, you can be helpful.
And that's the practicality.
Yeah.
I think, of where we're at.
And what you said about everything is a karmic appearance is so true. What else is it? Because what is appearing to us is our appearance.
Right.
So when we are, I don't want to use the typical examples, but when there is somebody out there who we just hate, that is our karmic appearance.
Right.
And it's our responsibility to shift the way we look at it, shift the way we respond to it. If we don't like it, if we don't like that karmic appearance, how do we change our view so that we are having an appearance that is more in line with the way we want to be, more compassionate, more loving, more understanding, more accepting, a much more broader view. And that then opens it up for real positive change, the situation or a relationship.
This is all making me think, let's ask Geshe-Nima, maybe he could, I know it's hard for him timing wise, maybe we could have a 10 a.m. class so it's not as late for him, just have him show up now and then.
If you can.
I think I'll ask, well, he has this little
Yeah.
break, maybe next week we could meet an hour earlier and have him zoom in.
Compile a couple list of questions.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
coming
it's
up
always
with
open to us emailing, and we can always email.
Yeah.
I think it'd be nice to see his face.
Okay.
It makes me think, because here we are always,
In verse 73, the line, asked whether the world has an end, the conqueror remains silent, introduces the following verse, which deals with the Buddha declining to respond to particular questions. The reason for the Buddha not saying whether the world has an end. So the Buddha never answered that particular question. We just sort of did. 74. Because he did not teach this profound doctrine to worldly beings who are not receptacles, the all-knowing is therefore known by the wise to be omniscient. When the Buddha was asked if the self and world had an end or not, he didn't reply. In this instance, self refers to the person and world refers to the aggregates. In this instance, self refers to the person and world refers to the aggregates. Remember, the way each of us experiences the world is via our aggregates. It's our aggregates that make the world appear to us the way it does. This is why the world appears to us in a way that is not at all like the way the world appears to a fly. The world is a very uh, changeable thing. It's not permanent the way we think it is. And so the world is appearing because to us the way it does because of our aggregates, which we have because of our karma, just like Brian was saying. So this is why it's a karmic appearance, and everyone has different karma, slightly different karma, and therefore everyone, even if they're humans, their world appears in a different way to them than it does to you. So, in this instance, self refers to the person and world refers to the aggregates, both the internal aggregates that are the basis of designation of a person and the external forms and so forth that appear to the person in their surrounding environment. Because the Buddha did not reply, the people who asked the question thought he was not omniscient. These people believed the person was permanent, unitary, and independent, whereas the Buddha stated that such a self could not exist. According to the Buddha, there is no person who can be the basis for the attributes of permanent, unitary, and independent, nor can there be any aggregates that a permanent, unitary, independent person depends on. Because an independent person can't depend on anything, otherwise they're not independent. However, the people asking this question assumed the existence of such a self and a world, the way most of us do. We start with that assumption. For this reason, it was inappropriate for the Buddha to answer one way or the other because both would be incorrect according to their way of thinking. If the Buddha said, yes, there is an end to the aggregates, people would have thought that there is no continuity of the mind or of the person after death. If he answered, no, there is no end to the aggregates, they would have thought that an inherently existent person continued on to the next life. Both are incorrect. If he said the self has an end, they would have thought a permanent, unitary, independent person has an end, believing that such a person exists now. However, no permanent, unitary, independent person exists at all. If he said that the self does not end, that would only reinforce their mistaken conception that a permanent person exists. Either way, their mistaken view of the person would become more solidly fixed in place. If he told them such a person didn't exist at all, they would either get angry or think that no person whatsoever exists. Although well-meaning, these people were not suitable vessels for learning selflessness because they would misunderstand selflessness to mean non-existence, and that wouldn't help them at all.
This reminds me, if I'm not mistaken, there is a premise of Buddhist debate where essentially you're not allowed to debate with someone unless both parties agree on the basic premise which you first establish. And if they don't,
Yeah.
Right.
you stay silent. And that's what this is reminding me of,
Right.
because essentially that's
All right.
and that's a thing in Buddhist
Right.
the formality of Buddhist debate, like which I think about sometimes when I think of especially like in public health.
Yeah.
You know, I think like, well, look, if we can't agree on it, then all we're going to do is reify each other's position.
That's right.
So there has to be some common ground where we do agree before we can even start,
Right.
right?
Right.
And that's kind of, I don't know. I think that's an illustration.
So excellent point you're making. I mean, yes, and I think that's exactly the point of this. And you can see how we're in the world that we observe. There's so much. There's not people aren't finding a common ground where they can agree, and then then because of that agreement can come to some kinds of ways that we can coexist peaceably. You know, this doesn't seem
How
to
many
be the case.
examples might exist where Buddha never answered? This seems to me to be a little bit strange for a guy who gave 84,000 teachings.
I think
You know,
it's a brilliant teaching.
Well,
It's
no,
silence,
you know,
right?
people don't know how to interpret silence.
Well, the problem here is that because they had a particular view that he had, that was not the view he was teaching at, I guess at the time, you know, they had a particular view of inherent existence, so that no matter what he said, they would misinterpret it. They would misinterpret
And I
it.
mean, again, I find that a bit surprising that someone who basically has figured out everything, can't figure out a way to communicate.
That's the way he did it. I mean, they're saying as an omniscient being, that was the way he did it.
I know, but I don't think
So that was his answer.
That was the
I
answer.
got it. I don't think the answer helped.
It wasn't-
I was trying to educate.
But I mean, we don't know that.
We don't know. I mean, because of what could have done, if he had given any answer, that there may have been some people who, it would send them way down the wrong path.
Why
You
can't
say
not
that about
answering
almost-
be the answer?
Because, well, I think, you know, all I'm saying is that, we're all spending our time and effort trying to understand the teachings of the Buddha, the thoughts of the Buddha, the beliefs, the thoughts of the Buddha. We're trying to logic these out and trying to understand why that reality is one way or this is another way, whatever. And they have all of these somewhat esoteric examples and statements and ways of explaining all of these ideas and principles. So I just think I find it a bit strange that the answer is not the answer.
Well, the thing is about all these esoteric examples that we have, think of how long a period of time it takes for us to sort of come around to even understanding what's being talked about in some sense. So in the course of just one teaching, how can we possibly get all of that across to a group of people who don't even have the concept of?
But I believe most people don't have the concept when
Yeah.
you start teaching. I mean, this is.
I know, but we're learning in these phases, and we keep coming
But
back.
remind, just to inject some.
But if you're going to take
humor,
just one teaching and say, you know, what's the answer, and they're demanding an answer, the answer was to not answer.
I got what
Yeah.
I heard
Yeah.
you said. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's not the only, I mean, I think we can assume that's not the only teaching he gave those people,
Right.
right? So, because I get it, I get where you're coming from, because it's like, and I've experienced that a little bit with Zen teachers, where it's like, and it can be irritating.
Right, but it
You know.
forces you to think.
Yeah, it does,
It
but it
forces
also
you
can be
back on you.
irritating. Like my initial reaction would be like, "That's very, why are you not?"
Yeah. Well, we're trained in our education system to give me the answer.
Yeah,
Give me the answer.
exactly.
So that I can get the
Maybe
test right.
Explain why you don't want to give an answer. I mean, that would be an answer too.
But the explanation of why I didn't want to give the answer would have involved so much material
That they weren't ready.
that they just basically they're saying they weren't receptive to it.
So somebody comes to you, a fifth grader comes to you, Brian, and says, "Explain mitochondrial transport or something, or RNA." And how are you going to deal with that? Are you when they're not ready?
I already teach some college students at 8th grade level. I'll just dumb it down a little bit and we'll get upset. You know, so that's a bad example.
Yeah.
If that's what
It is.
In general, you try to make it accessible. I mean, you don't just say you're too young to understand that. I mean, you try to say something, give them some way of
Yeah.
getting closer to it.
It almost is like they were on a train to New York and the students were asking, is this train going to Houston? Well, that's a bad example because they couldn't go through Houston. You're on a train to New York and saying, is this train going to El Paso? You know.
What's interesting of Paso and Houston?
Well, I'm just saying, on,
Yeah, non-answer is the answer.
Right.
yeah.
Writing the non-answer, it actually causes people to think more independently about what that answer may be.
But the problem you have is they may not think correctly about the answer. They may have come up with an incorrect belief or an incorrect answer if you leave them to their own devices.
That's precisely what this commentary just said. If he had answered in a particular way, people would have looked at that as meaning something that he did not mean at all. And they would have thought,
explain
Right.
that.
but they were, well, yes, but if he explained it in a particular way, then they would go, well, that means that the person doesn't exist at all.
This reminds me so much of when I asked Geshe Rakpa, how will I find you in my next life? And he said, I'm not coming back. I mean,
Everything else you've been taught is that
right.
he was
so
coming back,
I
right?
have to now say, what am I talking about? My next life? What is he talking about? I? What does he mean by come back? You know, who is the I that I'm talking about? Who am I that I'm talking about? I mean,
Well, again, you could say the I is not the I you know as me in this life.
I don't know.
It-
But he didn't
better
answer.
than wait.
He
He
didn't
just said I'm
explain
not
that.
coming back and threw it back on me. And you know, here I am 15 years later, still contemplating.
But he gave you an answer
He did.
to the question.
He did. He did not remain silent.
Right, but
Yeah.
what we're talking about, the Buddha here,
Anyway,
Buddha
I mean,
didn't
I,
give an answer.
I mean, I get your thing. Yes, I don't know. It's kind of weird.
I mean, if the Buddha is indeed omniscient, if a Buddha is omniscient and knows that the only answer to give to this particular crowd is a non-answer, because otherwise it will be misinterpreted and it will be not helpful.
It's almost like when you know the press confronts some politician about some alleged something,
Right.
and if they answer, then it validates the
Right.
question, so they don't answer because the question is so invalid that is coming from such an erroneous.
I guess that's my question to you, Brian. It would be, can you think of an instance where not answering a question would be valuable to an
Well,
inquiry?
I would say the following. I mean, I do think there are times when you can give an answer to a question that people will misinterpret.
Yeah, definitely.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
But, and I got very good at this, when people would ask me questions or ask me for something, I didn't want to give them a direct answer, and I gave them what we call dean speak. You know,
what?
dean speak,
Oh,
which is I tell them something, they think I've answered their question, and they think they've gotten the answer they wanted, and they walk away, and when I didn't even commit to any
Politician's
answer.
answer.
Yeah.
Like the pivot.
But I mean, I always believe, look, if you're
Yeah.
gonna, if somebody asks me something, I will tell you what I believe and why I believe it. And like I said, may not agree with you, I may disagree with your interpretation, I may not give you what you want.
Yeah.
But I will certainly say this is why, this is a thought process I use to arrive at that decision. I just find it interesting
Yeah.
that for a person who's able to know how to teach every person at every level they're at, all of a sudden giving the non-answers the right path.
Perhaps, well, the first thing I would say is, I'm not omniscient. I doubt that you're omniscient. So we actually don't understand what that means because we're not that. If the Buddha is indeed omniscient, if the Buddha is omniscient, what that means is the Buddha understands every single thing that could be said and what would be the thing that the Buddha could do that would be the most helpful, beneficial. And in this case, it was to not answer that question.
and here we are,
Coming from
3,000 years. If omniscience means what I think it means, then here we are. He knew 3,000 years later, people would still be debating and thinking, what could this mean? And why would this be? That's pretty.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
I mean, it's just, I
That's
guess,
what
you
you
know,
call
kind of have to
evidence.
leave it there because there's really no, you know, what would the Buddha do? I don't know because I'm not omniscient. I don't know. You know, why did the Buddha do that? I don't know. I'm not omniscient. But I do trust these teachings. I trust the logic of them. So I'm left there. That's all I'm left with.
And my and the way I handle that too is I think also again I don't think that's the only that non-answer is not the only interaction you likely had with those
Mhm.
individuals.
I know.
In that instance, the
Yeah.
non-answer may have been, but that doesn't mean he wasn't helping them. Again, by
Right.
simplifying other concepts, by presenting the
Right.
lower schools to them because that's where they were at.
Mhm. Right.
Which he did. He taught all those other schools where,
Sure.
that
Yeah.
taught self-existence basically
Right.
in some form.
Yeah.
So that's why I said we're talking about higher school.
Right, he taught self-existence, so then he could say those schools aren't thinking right. So he taught it to you, then he destroyed it.
All right. I'm gonna
Yeah.
get through this last thing.
To that, and I remember we were in one of the tenets classes, we
Yeah.
had a big discussion about the nature of partless particles.
Yeah.
Something around partless particles, and after the class, of course, Madhyamika Prasangika does not accept that there could ever be such a thing as a partless particle.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it was like it had been concretized up one level, like, I asked him, so, well, what does Prasangika say about this issue? And they said, they don't even talk about it. It was like that. It was like, they don't even have this conversation.
All right, we have 5 minutes left, and I want to go just to this next little section because it directly is relevant to what we are talking about right now. This has brought up a very interesting discussion that the Buddha didn't answer the question. 4 ways to reply to different types of questions. In general, there are 4 ways to reply to different types of questions. 1, some questions can be answered straightforwardly. If someone asks, is sound permanent or impermanent? We can clearly say that it is impermanent. Sound continually changes. 2, some answers require qualifications. If someone was to ask, are all sentient beings who die born under the control of afflictions and karma? We would say that sentient beings who have abandoned afflictions and karma won't be born under their influence, while those who haven't abandoned afflictions and karma will.
How does no one abandon karma?
Well, when you reach nirvana, which is not enlightenment, you're not an enlightened being. You have ceased. You have had a direct realization of emptiness. You're liberated from samsara, and you're liberated from the afflictive actions and things and behaviors that was causing all the problems of samsara. But the job is not yet. You're not finished. It's like a solitary cessation, and it doesn't take into account that there's so much more to do. So that's what we're referring to there. 3, to respond to some questions, we need more information. If somebody asks, is a person who is on the path of accumulation superior? And if you recall, there are 5 paths in Buddhism to enlightenment. So the first is the path of accumulation, and you're accumulating the positive potential and qualities to be able to move on. The second path is the path of preparation. You're preparing for having a realization of emptiness. The third path is the path of seeing, which is the realization of emptiness. The fourth path is the path of meditation, where you grow stronger in your samadhi, your concentration, your meditation, your understanding. And then you finally are the fifth path, the path of no more learning, where you have the direct, non-conceptual experience of non-duality, all of the afflictive obscurations are gone, blah, blah, blah. So that's how it's explained in a nutshell. Okay, so the question is a person who is on the path of accumulation, that's the first path, superior? We have to answer with a question. Compared to whom? This is because such a person is superior in relation to those who haven't entered the path, but not in relation to the Buddhas and Arya Bodhisattvas. Then the fourth way, some questions are better left unanswered. An example is the question above. Does a permanent, unitary, independent person have an end or not? There are 14 such questions that the Buddha didn't answer because he knew that whatever answer he gave would not help the person. For this reason, he remained silent. And that's,
What are the 14 questions?
they didn't say.
Oh,
Apparently there
I
are
mean,
14 out of all those
What
84,000.
are the 14 questions good enough?
Yeah. That can be in the sign of the next time.
Search,
All right. But it's time, it's 12:30, so we'll do our quick discussion. Hey, it's always good to question,
Yeah.
right? I mean, how would we have to question? I mean, when I first read that, I had the same thought, Brandon. So, what do you mean the Buddha didn't answer this?
That's everything you should.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But it depends on who is the audience and how that's going to, is it going to harm them or help them? The correct answer, or whatever the answer that he would give, that we might be having an inkling of, such as non-duality, would make no sense and only confuse.
Well, that's why I say, yeah, I would spend some time thinking of, can you think of examples of instances where not answering somebody would be the right thing to do? I don't know, and just cook on that, like,
Yeah,
think
right.
about that.
Right.
And you may not, I don't know, you might not, but that's what I would.
Okay, so we'll do the final dedication here. In all my lives, may I not be separated from true lamas, and so enjoy the splendor of Dharma, fully perfecting the virtues of levels and paths. May we speedily attain the state of Vajradhara. Oh, that was the final. Let me do a little bit more than that. Okay. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the enlightened state of Guru Buddha, that we may liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. May the view of emptiness, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. I suppose one thing you could say is that in that group of people, that view of emptiness was so far from not being born or arising that there was to then all of a sudden talk about emptiness with that particular crowd, which were totally, I mean, apparently everything was permanent, unitary, independent. So to answer with an emptiness question, would have totally been confusing or misunderstood.
That's actually one of the Bodhisattva vows. We're not
That's
allowed
right.
to teach emptiness
Yeah.
to those that are unprepared.
Yeah,
You break it
Right.
out if you.
that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. But when you're saying a different group, yes,
Well, I mean, there could have been a different group that asked that question and they got an answer.
there absolutely. There could have been a different group asked the same question and got an answer, but not, depended on the group. I mean, that's kind of an interesting thing to think about.
Okay, well,
actually.
anyway, this
In terms of
is
teaching.
out there, in case
Yeah.
you're curious about.
The 14? Oh, good. We'll have to check that
It's
next.
findable and.
Yeah, I just been sending it to all y'all.
Okay, so it is
Here it comes.
12:32. So we will thank you, everybody. Good discussions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good seeing you.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you,
hi,
Chris.
When
Hi, Arthur.
I
think that might
I was
be-
having anxiety, panic attacks,
Yeah,
freaking
okay.
out when I was meditating.
Recording off.
And I asked them, what